One thing that's really interesting out there is a kind of a new idea in resumes, which is a infographic resume. And with an infographic resume, you've probably seen infographics, of course you have, online or whatever, where, the top 10 reasons to own a dog, and it has it as an infographic picture type thing with images to kind of talk about those 10 reasons. Same thing with a resume, that you can use an infographic type resume to tell your story. Now, like anything, there's pros and cons, or things I like or don't like about an infographic resume. So let's talk about that in case you're considering doing an infographic resume, and then you can decide whether you want to create your resume in a more of a standard, chronological, reverse chronological, hybrid type format like we talked about earlier, or something a little bit more, interesting like an infographic. So first off, what do we like? And you can see from this example, by the way, on this infographics, see how it's kind of lots of spacing, using images or graphs or pie charts or whatever, to kind of tell your story as opposed to more and more text. And it's, it's an infographic, kind of looks a little bit interesting. So let's talk about likes and don't likes. So first off, some things is, this is once again my opinion, and you can have your own opinion as well. One thing I really like about infographic resumes is they're unique. They really stand out. I'm going through hundreds and hundreds of resumes, and I tell you, and it's rare, but when I do get an infographic resume, that just pops out like, oh, look at this. Maybe because I like, design, I don't know, but it really stands out to me. I'm going to spend a little bit more time looking at that just because it's interesting and unique. It stands out. It pops out. So that's an advantage, something, about an infographic resume that I like. It's also real easy to review. Like in the example here, I can, with these charts and graphs, I can easily review and get a picture here of Alexander, an understanding of Alexander real quickly from the pictures and images that he uses. So it's easy to review, right? So that's a good thing. It really stands out, easy to review. Why wouldn't you use an infographic resume? That sounds like the main reason to do this, right? Well, a couple of things. A couple of big things that I don't like. One is machine readability, right? So you can have a machine or the pre-screening stuff or the screening type of software that they use that cannot, read that chart. They can't read those graphs. They could scan from the text, but let's say your text is part of, let's say, a design that you built in Canva or some kind of design program, GIMP, whatever it might be, Photoshop, whatever it might be, and then you export it as an image. So if we look at that pie chart, or if we look at that, the bar chart there, the text might not be individual text. It might be all part of an image that's been uploaded and put into the infographic. So that means that all the text that you see on there in those images can't be read by a machine. And they certainly can't read things like, the bars themselves. So if looking at this particular example resume, it might be able to pull up things like under the profile or the contact information, but everything else the machine might not be able to read, depending on how it's, created as far as those images. And so if it's unable to read, it's not going to be able to find those keywords, and it's going to sort you out. And that's a big downer. Let's be honest. And then also one of the things that makes it infographic in concept work, and then also on a resume is that there's less information. It's more communicated through pictures and images. But by having less information, it tells a little bit less about your story. It might tell the big parts of your story, but it doesn't get into those accomplishments. It doesn't get into those things that the machine can read. So that's a little bit of a don't like too. If the people who are looking at resumes only got a few resumes and they really just want to get those big picture things, yeah, great. Infographic might stand out. But if you're getting lots of resumes, you might look at it, but once I spend a little time looking at it, I'm like, oh, I like the formatting of that. Don't really know much about them. Okay, I'll next. And I'll put them into the not follow pile. That's assuming you even got to me at all, that the machine didn't screen up. So infographic resumes, if you want to do that, they're best for when you're directly applying to a job as opposed to uploading into some type of system, an applicant tracking system that's going to, that company is using. If you're directly sending it through email, right directly to somebody, that's where an infographic resume might stand out. Or it might stand out also for creative jobs, right? And a graphic designer who's applying to another graphic designer, the head of marketing or the head of graphic design, who's a VP or director, might appreciate your design skills, but you can communicate that too, with some of your samples. You might send them or upload or direct them to a website that you can look at to see samples of your work. You can do it that way as well too. So infographic resumes, there's real big pros and cons of those. And really, you want to start thinking about whether it's really right for you, because there's definitely some cons to it. Particularly if you're applying a lot to things we're uploading your resume and you're applying to things and you find you're not getting any responses, and you're sending this wonderful, beautiful infographic resume, it's probably because the machines are not scanning it or unable to scan it, and they're screening you out, unfortunately. So think about those things before you do an infographic resume.